On the 27th of March 2001, 11 entities met in preparation for one of the biggest football matches on the South African sporting calendar that was going to be staged at Ellis Park. Now, these included Ellis Park Stadium management, representatives of Kaizer Chiefs, the Premier Soccer League, the South African Police Services, 4 security companies, as well as the city of Johannesburg. Now, the minutes from that meeting show that, well, the plans were well on track and everything looked set for a successful match. But as we now know, unfortunately, 43 people lost their lives. Former PSL CEO Robin Peterson sat down with our journalist Vincent Sitsula, where he talked about the events that happened on the day. Let's take a look.
Well, we had a board of governors meeting that day, and one of the items on the agenda was my reporting back on plans that we had to build attendance again at the stadiums. You know, it's always been a big cry, you know, our stadiums are not full. And that year, even the derbies had not been sold out. So there was a big concern. How do we get the fans back into the stadium? And we'd developed a whole lot of plans. I presented them to the board. They'd all been approved. So it was a good day for me to start with. And I waited at the hotel. My son and some friends were coming also to go, and they were coming with a driver. And they left and I left from the hotel. It only takes 5 minutes normally from Sunnyside Park down to the stadium. Left at about 7 o'clock. And we were completely jammed up in the traffic going over Joe Slovo. And I eventually got into the stadium into the grounds of the stadium at about 8:20. So it took an hour and 20 minutes to get there. There was utter chaos in the street outside. Cars had just been abandoned. And I was furious about the fact that, you know, seemed like the Metro Police weren't doing their job. How could these cars be abandoned? So I was out and I was looking for the people outside, and I was talking to them and saying, what's happening? And they were saying, well, there was some trouble on the other side. So eventually I got inside and I went up into the presidential suite. And as I came out and was standing there looking at this full stadium that was completely abuzz, you know, 2 goals had already been scored by the time I got up there. I felt initially, my first feeling was, we've done it. This has been our dream, was to get this atmosphere back, to get the crowds back. And I said that to Emmy Cazaletty, who was, she worked for Chiefs at the time in marketing, and said to Emmy how happy I was. And she said, yes, it is wonderful, but she said, in the corner over there, yeah, I'm really worried. It seems to be there's some trouble there. And I looked and you couldn't see really from that distance what was going on. So I went and I got an all-access pass, and I went down through the tunnel and I went around and behind the goals, and I saw some medics working on some people there, and I was obviously very distressed and concerned, and I saw others that were there and no medics, and I went to the medics and I said, why is no one attending to these people? And he said to me, they're dead. And that was the first time, I think, that it really hit me, that people had died, and it was a massive shock. I ran to the corner where people, and we moved the perimeter boards, and I ran up into the stand and I was helping some people out, and I thought, no, this is crazy, we've got to stop the game, which should have been stopped, shouldn't have ever started. And I ran back along the touchline. I passed Kaizer, who was going the other way, and we said, I'm going to stop the game. He said, yes, you must. And I went to the 4th official and was telling him we have to stop the game, and there was a corner kick about to be taken on the other side, and the 4th official was trying to get the ref's attention, and he wasn't noticing because he was concentrating on the corner. So I ran onto the field and waved my hands, and the referee saw this person coming onto the field. He came over and I said, we have to stop the game. And that was the beginning of a terrible night, as just the reality of what had happened became clear. The bodies were brought onto the field. It was a devastating experience, and that led to another 10 months of real trauma and dealing with the aftermath of that. That was really the end of my time at the PSL, because I spent the next 10 months with a commission of inquiry, working with the families. We set up a crisis committee at the Sunnyside Park. dealing with those who'd been injured. There was just a massive amount to do. And then at the end of the Commission of Inquiry, then I resigned and ended a few months earlier than my contract. It was just, I think, something that has traumatized me and lives with me for the rest of my life. As I said at the Commission of Inquiry, I have to take moral responsibility because I am the CEO and this was our match. I believed that we had done what we needed to do. Normally the PSL was in charge of security for all our big matches, or all our matches. But when Chiefs insisted we play at Ellis Park, because they said it's our home ground, Pirates are at FNB Stadium, and it's our home match. We insist the match must be played at Ellis Park. And, there was a lot of debate. We were trying to say it must be played at FNB. They said it must be at Ellis Park. And then there was a massive challenge to find a date for the game, because at those days there was no FIFA calendar. So international matches and friendlies and that happened any time of the year. And then what would happen is that we would have, if more than 2 players were called up into any national team, their match had to be postponed. So we had a number of postponements with international matches. We had a number of postponements because of CAF. That year Sundowns went all the way through to the finals, and so their matches had been postponed. So we had a massive backlog, and it was a struggle. There was no weekend that we had available. So we reluctantly said, okay, it must be on the Wednesday night. And I regret that. I regret that we didn't just say, this must override everything else. But we did it, and I was relieved because Ellis Park, when we had our meetings with them, they said, we are going to do the security. We have professional security. We are going to run the security of the match. So PSL stepped back. We just did the perimeter as marshals. So we weren't in charge of security on that night, which was somewhat of a relief for me. It doesn't change the fact of what happened, but so there was just a whole lot of things, and that was a very trying and difficult year.